This is the gospel of Jesus Christ according to Matthew, the 14th chapter. Now when Jesus heard about the beheading of John the Baptist, he withdrew from there in a boat to a deserted place by himself. But when the crowds heard it, they followed him on foot from the towns. When he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion for them, and cured their sick. When it was evening, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a deserted place, and the hour is now late. Send the crowds away so that they may go into the villages and buy food for themselves." Jesus said to them, "They need not go away. You give them something to eat." They replied, "We have nothing here but 5 loaves and 2 fish." And he said, "Bring them here to me." Then he ordered the crowds to sit down on the grass. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and blessed and broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the crowds. And all ate and were filled, and they took up what was left over of the broken pieces, 12 baskets full. And those who ate were about 5,000 men, besides women and children. This is the gospel of our Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. So once again, the main story here is the distinction between abundance and scarcity. And regardless of the mechanism by which we imagine this miracle happening, the point is that it begins with the perception that there is not enough. And it ends with taking up what is left over. That is important. In a world that teaches us that competition is righteous, a world that convinces us the needs of another child of God are pitted against our own needs for limited available resources, a world that teaches us that we are supposed to tear down our barns and build bigger ones to protect our excess from those suspicious others who might take it. In that world, it is important for followers of Jesus to remember that God has created the world with an abundance, and the image of scarcity is an illusion created by how much is kept locked away in those barns, inaccessible for anyone to use. The miracle is an object lesson. It is a children's sermon to demonstrate the point of abundance that he was talking about in the parables last week. So do not lose that point in search of something else here, but kind of a side quest of theological inquiry, or answering that question from the 90s bracelets, what would Jesus do? It may be worthwhile to try and empathize with his position in this story. I mean, he has just heard that his cousin was murdered. In his grief, he tried to go be by himself, and the crowd showed up asking for more. And so did his disciples. They come up to him and say, "Hey, you should send these people away. They've taken enough of your time," as they apparently planned to hunker down with him. You see, I often hear this part of the story presented, not from other clergy, mostly from well-meaning members of congregations. I hear this part presented as a demonstration of the burdens of pastoral ministry. Because you know that the pastor has a personal life too, and when we try to withdraw into our own griefs and struggles, the congregation can often show up with its needs. And there seems to be what I consider to be a valid discussion of the pastoral obligation at that moment. As a called and ordained minister set apart for this role, do we have an obligation to show the compassion that Jesus did in that moment? Or, as just another baptized child of God in this congregation, do we have the right of every baptized child of God to call upon Jesus for that compassion? I think the answer is yes. As pastors, we ought to be held to a higher standard in those moments, and we are human. We will fail if Jesus is the only acceptable standard put before us. I appreciate the members of my congregations that hold me to account, and I appreciate those who protect my humanity. I am far from Jesus, and the people who do this work with me are well aware of that. But if we are going to look at it this way, then I want us to see what Jesus asks of his disciples, of his congregation in that moment. I don't want us to look at it because that's something that I think smaller congregations need to learn. I want us to look at it because it's something I think these congregations do well. It's actually something I think we are uniquely positioned for. And in a world that lifts up the Walmart move in and infiltrate with an abundance of resources in a community style of congregational ministry as the only model of success, it is worth seeing what the mom and pop shops might be uniquely equipped to do. When the disciples came to Jesus and say, "You should send this crowd away. They are asking too much of you," as many well-meaning congregation members do when they think their pastor is risking burnout. When they do that, Jesus doesn't say, "Well, you're right. We should send them away. I could use a breather." But he also doesn't say, "Don't worry. I got this. Let me do it." He says they don't have to go home. You give them something to eat. I'm not the only one here who can do this, he seems to be saying. And of course, they don't think anyone else can do it. They've only got a couple loaves and some fish. And we know there is a miracle coming that probably Jesus did have to be there for. But the disciples, they heard that and just did what they were told. They brought forth their loaves and their fish. As inadequate as it seems, they brought it forward. They didn't just tell Jesus to rest. They were willing to stand up and do part of that work with him. It's almost as if, along with modeling the abundance of God's provision, he is modeling the methods of his ecclesia, the church. We do this together, he seems to be saying. And I believe that is what shines in small church ministry. See, when I visit the sick, I am rarely the first one from the congregation to have gotten there. I always hear about the prayers and cards that were sent ahead of me. It is the members of my congregation that connect us to the community and offer suggestions of collections to take up so we can support the work that is already happening around us. It is the members that gather to study scriptures while I go on to lead worship at another congregation. And even in the Bible studies I do lead, no one ever shows up as a passive recipient of some grand knowledge that I have. It is always a conversation. And even preaching from this pulpit. In the weeks that I am unable to be here, I am able to call on members of this congregation that will step up and fill in. I mean, folks, I believe that there is value of my vocation, and when people call on me in times of need, I appreciate the way it affirms that belief. I love being a pastor, but I love even more being a part of God's church with the people of God's church. And I'm not saying that kind of cooperation and connection can't happen in a larger, more programmatic context. But it seems to me like they struggle to create it every bit as much as the smaller churches struggle to create the programs. And I hope that members of small churches are talking about the work they do together as people, not just titles and roles, when they talk about why they come there. Because I think there's a hunger for that in this world. I believe there is a hunger for a place where we can all be the full person God made us to be, not confined to some role, a place where someone given the title of pastor can sit in the pews and just be a part of worship, as I was given the opportunity to do just last night. You see, maybe the part of the abundance that we have the most trouble imagining is caught up in the fact that we are given these roles and titles in the world, but none of us are merely the label the world wants to give us. We are all so much more. And the ways in which everyone in these congregations is able to live into that more, beyond that single facet of their identity in these communities of faith, is magical and every bit as miraculous as loaves and fish, and maybe, just maybe, gathering this way enables us to imagine how much more we can be for each other in the larger community around us, to live into this abundant life that we have that is worth sitting down on the grass and inviting people in to join. And I promise, when we have shared it all, there will be leftovers to collect.